Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome back to this new episode of Rebel Reject Create video podcast. And today my guest is Mr. Kevin Groen, who is a behavior change expert and a spoken word artist. And he's very keen on exploring everything that is totally uncomfortable. So welcome today, Kevin.
Thank you.
I just want to dive straight into it. I mean, what has behavior got to do with creativity? Is there any common ground between those two things?
Okay. Absolutely. So I don't think we often that generally speaking, we realize how many of our behaviors are instinctively driven. And how much of our behaviors have been socialized without us per se realizing it.
Right.
And so the moment we want to change our responses to external triggers, for example, we have to become creative in a way. We have to, there's so many aspects of creativity. We have to create a new behavior. But in order to create a new behavior, we have to figure out what does my environment trigger in me. I have to figure out why do I behave in the way that I do.
Yeah.
There's so much creativity going into it.
Right.
How do I redesign my environment so that the new behavior that I'm trying to develop, the new habit that I'm trying to develop, is more likely going to develop?
Right. Right. And then, I mean, you're also a spoken word artist and a poet. I- Are there any sort of methodological overlaps between what you do with poetry and what you do as a consultant and trainer or coach with behavior?
I think the first thing that immediately comes to mind is being deliberate with words.
Ah,
So as a spoken word artist, I want to play with words, and I want to play with words deliberately, because I know that certain words and certain combinations can create a particular vibe, a particular flow, a particular feeling. And I know, as a poet, I know the I know the importance of metaphors. I know the importance of alliteration. I know the importance of the double meaning or the multiple meanings of words and sentences. And then in my work as a behavior change expert, the what's interesting is literally the way you phrase a sentence, the grammar you use in asking questions is likely going to impact the way that people interpret what you say. And therefore, their response, their behavior is going to impact it by my choice of words.
wow. Yeah, I like that. I mean, that's not something most people think about every day.
True, true. And then, also, again, if I want to change my behavior, let's take, for example, empathy, right? Empathy is a big word, heavily misunderstood all around the world. So many myths around empathy. What most people think is empathy is actually false empathy. And it's almost like the opposite, like judging. So if you're having a bad day, and my response to you sharing your bad day with me is, you know what you should do? It sounds familiar,
Yeah.
right? That's not empathy. That's the opposite of empathy. I'm not sitting with your experience. I'm fixing your experience, but you never asked me to fix it. So I'm making all kinds of judgments about you. So now, if I want to change that response, if I want to actually be empathetic, I have to change my response. I have to literally change the wording that I use to respond to you having a bad day.
Hmm. Right. Interesting. So now you perform a lot on stage as a spoken word artist all over Europe, actually, at the moment. And which leads me to believe that the number of people come up to you after your performance and say, Kevin, wow, like how do you do that? I want to be more creative. I want to write poetry. How do you do that? And I'm going to set a limit. You're only allowed to say one thing to them. What one big chunk of advice would you give them to help them?
Two words: feel and write.
That's three, but it'll do.
Okay.
Feel and write. Are you picking up on that Ernest Hemingway quote? It's easy to write a novel. Just open up a vein and bleed into the typewriter.
Oh, I definitely relate to that. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, can you unpack that a little bit? Because obviously 3 words is a little bit tricky.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges that also I've experienced when I started writing and performing is that I'm too focused on it has to be perfect, whatever that means. I mean, who decided what perfection looks like in spoken word poetry? But that's a whole different story and conversation. But I think people are often, and I notice that in my workshops as well. I sometimes do poetry workshops, and I notice that a lot of people are concerned. Oh, it has to be perfect. It has to follow mathematical rules. If I don't follow the rhyme scheme A B, then it's not poet. And it's like, okay, first of all, you sound like you put so much pressure on yourself.
Mm.
How can you even write anything with that much pressure? So just feel what it is that you want to write. Just feel into yourself and just simply start writing. And if it's sentence after sentence, great. If it's a paragraph, pause, something new, great. But just get whatever it is that you feel out on paper. And then the editing
Ah,
happens afterwards.
yeah. And that reminds me of another Hemingway quote. Is it write drunk, edit sober?
Yeah. I like it's interesting. I can't edit if there's nothing on paper.
Well, no.
So there needs to be something on paper for us to even start that conversation about, okay, now in what form do you want to tell that story?
Hmm.
But I need to have some content first. And I think this is the error, is the comparison. You know, I go to a spoken word event and it's like, oh my God, that person is amazing.
Yeah.
And I want to know, it's like, I want to be like, I want to write like, I want to sound like, and that's where I think that's where I start fucking up.
All right. Hey, if you're watching this and you're enjoying the conversation, please don't forget to hit the like button. And if you're really enjoying it, hit the subscribe button, because this is just one of a series of conversations. And if you're intrigued to hear what Kevin actually does as a spoken word artist, check out the links in the show description, and you'll be able to find all of his online homes where you'll find examples of what he does, and be able to see when he's next on stage. Now, you just said something there that I really relate to, is this idea of going to a spoken word show and seeing someone perform before you're due to perform and thinking, wow, they're amazing.
Yeah.
And, I don't do rhyme and I don't really do rhythm.
Yeah.
And, I'm kind of old school, and I wouldn't say classical in my approach to my poetry, but it's very different to that kind of rhyming, rhythmic driven, sort of maybe even vaguely hip hop spoken word. How important is diversity in creativity?
Oh, um, it's, for me at least, a major source. Um, it, I think what's been really interesting for me, for example, if I look at my work around behavior change, and I once had to do I think it was a 2 hour, 3 hour session for 120 people, and I was the only facilitator. So it's like, shit, like I can't give any person here personal attention, which I prefer to do. So it's gonna be a kind of almost self-facilitated session, because I can't possibly really manage 120 people. But those were the conditions. That's the reality that I had to work with.
Hmm.
And so if I'm gonna apply the same principles that I use if I work with a group of 10 people to a group of 120 people, many things aren't going to work. And so I've been thinking, how the hell am I going to entertain, in the broadest sense of the word, entertain these 120 people and have them learn something from it?
Yeah.
And so what I ended up doing is, there's this game called Chinese checkers, where you can play that with 6 people, and you got to get, it's like a star shaped board, and you got to get your pieces of the board to the other side of the board, and people, and from all corners they have to get to the other side, and you can make one move, like, and you can jump over one person, so you can block other people's routes. That's a game. It's essentially a slightly complicated version of our 2 player chess checkers.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, wait, I can take that game and turn it into a mass human simulation. And it wasn't just like I wanted to do that, but it was like, okay, because we had talked about what should these 120 people learn. And part of what they had to learn was letting go of control.
Ooh.
Well, if you're in a simulation where you start losing overview, um, you're going to have to let go of some of that control. And so the inspiration for working with 120 people in a leadership related setting came from a board game.
Yeah.
And the more I've been kind of doing behavior change and spoken word, is the more I realize that a lot of my new ideas don't come per se from going to other trainings or going to a spoken word evening. It comes from going to other events. Recently, I went to a theater play, an incredible theater play. And again, that triggers new thoughts in me. And you could argue a theater play is in some way spoken word, but it's not entirely a specific the way that we know spoken word. But I get so many ideas from that. I get ideas from my behavior change work from board games, from going to places, and suddenly an idea pops up. I think the more you expose yourself, and I think this is really critical. It's not that you have to go to an event with the idea, I have to gain creativity from this. It's you go to different places, different people, different types of activities, and you immerse yourself into it. And maybe a year later, you connect the dots. But if you never attended that event in the first place, you can't connect with that dot because it doesn't exist in your memory bank.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, collecting dot and a diversity of dots, not just doing the same old thing over and over and over again. Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot.
And it's like when people say, I want to learn spoken word. And I think the typical advice would be, oh no, so people say, I want to get better at spoken word.
Yeah.
And the typical advice is go to a spoken word workshop, go to a performance workshop. And I'm thinking, yes, that can work. But have you considered going to a vocal coach? Which no one thinks about going to a vocal coach. Yeah. It's the same thing with, I want to improve my public speaking skills. And the first thing people come up with is go to a public speaking training. Like, well, that's very generic. Have you considered going to an improv class? Yeah. Right. And I guarantee you that you can learn more about public speaking from an improv class than going to a one-day public speaking training. Yeah. But people don't connect those dots.
Yeah. Yeah. Talking about changing things, you also, you become extremely active as an activist. How important do you see creativity in changing the world, and what role does it have to play?
Oh, so for me, activism, I have a love-hate relationship with activism. I prefer not to do it because it takes a lot of energy. I kind of have to do it because my well-being depends on other people learning more about racism, for example. Women's lives, well-being depend on me learning more about patriarchy, sexism, toxic masculinity. I think when people hear the word activism, talk about associations, talk about the power of words. Yeah. When people hear the word activism, they have a particular image in mind. And I don't mean that everyone has the same image, but everyone has an image in mind when they hear the word activism. And for some, that is a person screaming in a megaphone, shouting at other people. That's just one tiny element of activism. I think what the longer I've been in activism, one of the things that I think is happening is that within activism, activists often don't realize that in order to move things, sometimes we have to take a step back. For example, someone shouting in a megaphone gets you attention. Really important. Yeah. If it's about a dialogue, that megaphone won't help. Yeah. Right. So the moment there needs to be a dialogue, you need another skill set. The moment you need to educate people, you need another skill set. The moment you need to change policies, you need another skill set. And it's very rare for one person to have all of those skill sets. So the creativity in activism is one about realizing, where is my skill set in my comfort zone? Where can I add the most value? To realizing, what skill sets do I not possess? And maybe do I not want to develop either? And who are the people that have that skill set? And interestingly, for example, I don't have a background in history. I'm not a historian. If somebody says, can you give a lecture about the history of colonialism? I'm like, no, I can't. But if you want to learn more about how do you change people's behaviors around inclusion, around racism, yeah, sign me up. Right. The creativity comes from understanding there are different skill sets, different needs required at different phases, and sometimes maybe at the same time. Yeah. But looking at the people who possess all of those different skill sets. And also, I learned something last weekend at a panel about spoken word. And this other person on the panel said, you also, even if you possess the skill set of running a workshop, that doesn't mean that the target group that you have to educate is the right target group for you. So, and she gave an example of, there's this person that I work with and I love, I'm not going to put him in front of kids. Yeah. I'm going to put him in front of grown-ups. Yeah. I think that creativity also comes from understanding all of these different factors. Where are you? Where am I at my most creative? And that also has to do with understanding where are my skill set, where is my comfort zone, where is not my comfort zone, but also with what kind of audience can I work well with? And if I can work well with this kind of audience, there is going to be creativity in our collaboration. But if I can't work with this kind of an audience, my creativity is going to be stifled.
Right, right. So there's a lot of self-awareness going into that.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Excellent. Kevin, it's been a blast talking to you. Thank you so much for coming onto the show. And again, just a quick reminder to you, if you're watching this, if you've enjoyed the conversation, please hit the like button and hit the subscribe button to keep up to date with all the other interviews that have happened so far, and there are plenty more still to come. You can check out Kevin's links and more information about his work in the show description below. Kevin, any last words from you?
Everyone is creative.
Yes, I agree. Thank you very much, sir.
Have a good day.
Ciao.